Hello, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. It's my first time in Korea. My first memory of Korea was when I was 7 years old through martial arts. It's called Hoijun Musul, and this was the first attachment I had with Korea. I loved the country from a young age, and it taught me a lot about dedication, discipline, and most importantly, to have fun with whatever I'm doing. So thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. There's more to the story, though. If you look into the eyes of this kid, there's another passion and hunger growing inside of me, and that's the world of design. Since I was a kid, whenever I could get a chance, I would buy all these kinds of magazines, Photoshop, 3D, just be fascinated by what's on the covers of these magazines, what's inside these magazines, and dream that one day maybe I could do what's similar to what's in these magazines. And this kept me awake at night. It kept me hungry for more and to keep growing and growing. So that took me on a path to start learning Photoshop and get into design. And my beginnings was just designing desktop wallpapers as a fan for NBA players. I loved basketball as well. And I would just do these and try to learn the program and try to get into design and get into this design community. And through this journey, I went to university, studied graphic design, industrial design, and that took me on a career where I got to work on lots of great products in footwear, automotive, architecture, and so on. So I'd like to share maybe a few highlights from my career before I jump into some case studies with you. The first stop is working with design with Nike as a design intern. And through Nike, I really learned a lot about problem solving and how I can approach innovation and how to do things differently. And at Nike, I got a chance to work on lots of amazing products, including stuff for great athletes like LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, just to name a few. After Nike, I shifted gears and I went into the gaming industry, and I got to work for EA Sports. And with EA Sports, I worked as a UI designer, user interface designer, and I got to work on the game FIFA 15. So that was a whole different experience for me as a designer. And then from EA Sports, I got to go to work with Adidas in Brooklyn, New York, as a senior concept designer. And my role was mainly to imagine what is the future of the brand. What are things that we can do that is different? Just think blue sky, totally innovative ideas. And at Adidas, I got a chance to work again with some other amazing athletes, like James Harden, Damian Lillard, and work on different sports like football, basketball, running, and so on. So after Adidas, again, I shifted gears. I went to automotive, moved to Michigan. And at Ford, I worked with a digital creation team. And that was the experiences that you get inside of the cars. So like all the animations and all that kind of stuff. So more visual effects. And at Ford, I got a chance to work on the Ford Bronco and the Mustang Dark Horse. And then my final stop in my career was working with Apple. Worked with them as a hardware art director, where I got to overlook a lot on the Apple Watch 7, how these were done in CGI and the photo shoots and just the details and everything that had to do with the Apple Watch 7. So after all these experiences, jumping gears from one industry to another, from one role to another, I was always thinking to myself, what am I really? Am I an industrial designer, visual effects artist? So I had this curve of up and down. I showed you the highlights. But it's always really these obstacles that I went through that pushed me to the next level. And these obstacles had to do with learning new programs, getting to network, getting to understand things in the industry better. And then you just see the highlights, of course, which is the wins. And these are the things that everybody sees, and it's not behind the scenes. So yeah, through these experiences, jumping around different industries, my whole idea was then that I want to blur the world of visual effects and industrial design together. And then whenever I approach design, I can start to look at things through these two lenses, visual effects and industrial design, because that's my sweet spot. That's where I really enjoy and have fun, and I like to design and create things as an artist and as a designer. So then I started my own studio in 2019, launched it in New York, Musawi Studios. And through my studio, again, I got to work with some amazing clients on different projects. And I'd like to show you a short showreel before I jump into some case studies. All right. So now I'd like to get into some case studies behind the scenes, some of the projects that I worked on, and mainly focus on Adobe Substance Painter and how I utilize that into my workflow in different ways. So I've worked a lot on shoes. I'm trying to not to show a lot of shoes just in the beginning, and then I want to show you some other stuff. So the first case study is footwear, shoes. And this is where I really use Substance the most in my projects. And the first project is for Adidas Fear of God. Fear of God is a brand that is collaborates with Adidas a lot. And my role here was to work as a 3D designer, where I would work with the footwear designers and try to bring their vision to life. So doing the 3D modeling, the advanced visualizations. And the whole process here helps us with the factory. So once I design a shoe, or once they design a shoe and I work with the team, how can we communicate best to the factory the kind of materials, the volumes, the shape of things, and it just makes the project much faster and easier to work with. So for this shoe, I started with a 3D model. And when I first got into 3D modeling, which I'm sure a lot of you also faced, maybe the first thing you learn is how to create the shape and the geometry of things. And you could spend so much time on how things look, but then with the bad texture, with bad lighting, with bad rendering, the product or the model is killed. So you really need all those different elements to come together very nicely. So in the past, when I would do UV texturing, as a beginner, I would do this, just project it in 3D Max, and just get this very bad UV texture and think, I am done. But then I learned to fall in love with UV texturing and the importance of texturing, and make sure that all my products and all my models are on point and ready to go. And this is something that I like with Adobe Substance, that you can also apply the auto UV to it. So you can just create your models, and then it's going to do it for you. So a lot of headache is gone there. So once I do this, I would, for this instance, for example, take it into Adobe Substance. And there are two things that I really like when I move this into Substance, any model. First is the texture set list. So I can define in 3D Max, for this one, for example, every element on its own so that it's grouped into layers, just like Photoshop. And then I can just work on each element on its own, and it doesn't get too confusing, especially when you have a lot of parts in one product, like a shoe. And then the nice thing is that I can also control specifically the normal heights, the height maps, the diffuse maps, and so on. And then Adobe Substance is going to do the magic and bring it all together and make it look very realistic. So when it comes together, of course, I use 8K maps always. It just gives me the best quality, although 2K and 4K I've seen nice results. But I always go with 8K, since it's there, just go with the highest. And then we created some nice beauty shots, nice lighting, and tried to create some marketing imagery for this shot, just so that it can look cool and also build up the hype on it. So then, thanks to Substance, we went from something like this to something like this, where it really comes to life and you can see the materials and how they also react with light and everything else. And also some more beauty shots, even looking very close up to the stitches and to the micro details of the materials. Again, when we communicate this to the factory, it just saves us so much time, saves us money, and allows us to iterate much more. And these are, I think, 3 elements that really stand out with Substance every time. So if we look at this shoe, for example, and the kind of materials that I used on this shoe, I just want to show you how easy it gets. So every part is pre-existing material that you can find on the Substance page as an asset. For example, if you look at this one, the black material, the mesh material, this is a concrete material, has nothing to do with shoes. So the beauty of it is that I can just bring it in, put it on my shoe, scale it down, change the glossiness of it, and change a few properties, and then it works like a fabric. And that's the beauty of things. Like, you can use a wood material for footwear. You can use concrete for something that has nothing to do with concrete. And then just hack it and change it to your liking, and it can give you these very cool and realistic results. Same thing with another shoe that I worked on for Versace. We worked on this very detailed model. Looks very cool, works very hard on it, but then how can we make it even look realistic through textures? Again, bring it into Substance, create some beauty shots, and just the level of detail on the grains or the texture of the traction at the bottom of the shoe. It's very easy to work with, and I would just mask it and then add the colors, add the textures, and then it would come to life. So a few more shots from the Versace shoe. And this is basically my workflow for every shoe that I create, always ending with the beauty shots, because it just sells the product to the client as well. Another part of footwear design that I work on, so I did mention in the beginning, I am an industrial designer as well. I love to imagine the future. What if, asking what if questions. So for this, for example, this concept project, what if Lamborghini created a footwear, performance footwear? What could that look like? So as an industrial designer, again, I can take this into Substance after I make my model, and then just throw on lots of materials, start to explore. There's no right or wrong. Just see what could work, what couldn't work. So this is another project that I created in Substance. It also won the Paris Design Awards last year. And then just working on the mesh materials, adding the logo of the Italy flag, emissive materials, refractive materials, all that. It's all just in one place. Drag and drop and change and play around and have fun. So that's the thing, like just keep having fun. And this is a close-up of the Lamborghini shoe. And a few more details. Especially, I guess, my favorite part of Substance is working with leather materials. Just how realistic it looks, it always fascinates me every time. And this is one more example of a leather material on a soccer boot, football boot. So you can see like how basic my model can look, and then how realistic the leather can start to look thanks to the lighting and the bump and the height maps. All right, so this was the first case study. Second case study, another shoe. This will be the final shoe. This is called the Adobe Fast Runner. And the Adobe Fast Runner, this was a project that I collaborated on with Adobe a few years ago. And the beauty of this process was that it was more of a displacement map sculpting technique. And I was fascinated when I first learned that it could be done. And it just opened up so much more room for me to ideate and explore. So I started with a sketch, just like the normal design process as an industrial designer. And then I took that sketch, made a very, very, very basic 3D model in 3D Max. There's basically nothing happening on the shoe. Prepared my UVs for it, basically just the upper, make sure that it looks good, the upper part of the shoe. And then jump into Substance. So with the displacement technique and the sculpting technique, what I really like to do usually on my models is just randomly drag and drop like stuff that look interesting. Like this is an iron or metal material. And then see how that can look as a height map on my shoe. Just exploring form and geometry and seeing what could be possible. Because sometimes we can imagine things as sketch, but sometimes it just opens up so much more room to think about the future. What if you do this? What if you do that? So this was a really interesting process for me to always apply in every product that I design. Again, there is no right or wrong. Everything is possible. So for this specific shoe, for example, I'm going to call out every material that I used. For the upper, I used this liner bellow duct, again, an existing material, added it to the midfoot section of the shoe, masked it off, and now I had this kind of ribbed material that looks like it can expand and get stretchy. And then the top part, I used this existing mesh tool, not much there, just scaled it to fit my liking. And then using the stitch tool in Adobe Substance and getting different kind of stitches, whether it's a straight line, whether it's a zigzag stitch, or whether it's an X stitch. And there's lots of different brushes that you can use, which I think is very nice for adding the details to your products. And then adding this terrazzo generator material just as a diffuse map. So looking at color, this is like something used for bathroom tiles or just in architecture. But now I'm using it for footwear. All right, moving on to the bottom of the shoe. I use two materials, the back part and the front part. For the back part, I use this aluminum honeycomb pattern. Again, it's a metallic pattern, but I'm just making use of the displace map. And then for the front part, I'm using this iron diamond armor. So again, nothing to do with shoes, but let's use it on a footwear project. Finally, I used the stylized rusty hammered iron. Again, applied it to the whole shoe, changed some properties, changed the scale, the colors, and just use it as a diffuse map, and then it made the shoe pop and come to life. Finally, for the bottom of the shoe, again, use some terrazzo tile material, and I also added some displacement using some line work created in Illustrator. And it's basically just drag and drop, mask it, and you're good to go. Finally, to render, I rendered this in Adobe Substance. And what I liked here in this process is that I can quickly change HDRI maps. And the good thing is that I can take that HDRI map specifically back to 3D Max if I want to render it there. So then it's going to match one-to-one. And that really makes things easier, especially if I want to render it, let's say, within a context. It's in a room or a gym or somewhere else. It's going to be very easy to transition there. So that was in Substance. This is in 3D Max. You can see how close they are. And then finally, we also 3D printed it, which was a very interesting process. You can see how good the 8K textures look in 3D print, even how micro it looks. And it looks just like a real shoe. So from a production standpoint, just send this to the factory, and you're good to go. The shoe is there. So just some beauty shots for this shoe, going from very simple to something very detailed. And another beauty shot, very simple model, to something that looks very detailed and just adds some hype and excitement to the product. All right. The third case study is creating eye candy shots. I like to create lots of eye candy shots, whether it's a real product, a concept product. And the whole idea of eye candy shots is you can use it for marketing, building hype, excitement, and social media. So I really have fun doing these shots. And again, Substance plays a huge role. So in automotive, I have used it quite a bit, whether it's on the exterior of the car. For example, all the stickers on this car were done in Substance very easily, just drag and drop. And then the actual material of the car, and also the environment, like the polished concrete, for example, on the top right corner. And same goes for the interior of the car, adding it to the actual fabric of the seats, or whether it's the plastics, or whether it's the rubber, or anything inside of the car. And then also some consumer electronics, again, very simple, going from something like this to something like this, where I'm using very simple materials, just 3 materials, using a glass material, using a plastic material, and using some mesh material, cloth material. And again, due to the detailed level of the materials, it just makes it pop and look very realistic. Some more. This was done for Sonos. Very simple. Again, like the materials that I'm using here, it's not very complicated. You can do it in any program at this level. But then it's like the small details that you have, like the interface, and how can you add those details, whether you do it manually in Photoshop or you do it in Substance. Like, I think this is really where it saves the time. And it's these small details that really push the product forward. And again, like mixing between wood and metal and fabric. So it's a real nice harmony when you see them all come together. And some final shots for Bang & Olufsen. Again, whether it's the leather materials that I'm using or the metallic materials, stainless steel, and so on. So again, detail, detail, detail. That's the magic of it. All right, the fourth case study is now shifting gears from industrial design more towards visual effects. In visual effects, I work a lot on specifically fabrics and cloth animations and simulations. So it's really interesting to also bring these details in motion, not just as still renders. And it's nice how it reacts to light. I think that's my favorite part. Like you can see it in here. Just the detail really shows in movement. This is a piece of fabric that is dancing in midair, very subtle. And then how can we bring something like this in motion to Substance and back? So this was created in Houdini. I exported it as a FBX, just one frame. and then took that FBX into Substance, and then used the Substance materials, played with the scales, the colors, the properties. And once I was happy with that one frame, the beauty is the integration plugins that exist. So there is one for 3D Max, there is one for Houdini. So it would just package all of my materials together, and then it would send it right back to Houdini. I don't need to do anything. The diffuse maps, the roughness, the glossiness, everything at the right percentage and the right amount. So then I apply it to my animation, and then it's just ready to go. I'll just start to play with lighting and how it starts to react to lighting. And I do the same for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images that come. Everyone is different, but again, how can we make the process faster and do more and more and more? All right. This is a quick video of a compilation of different fabrics I've done using Substance. All right, so those were all visual effects shots. Now we'll move to the fifth case study, the fifth side of how I use Substance and how I enjoy using it. I'll talk about CMF, which is in the world of industrial design is color, materials, and finishes. It's a standard term. This was for a client that I worked in New York, and they produced these premium bags, backpacks. And they wanted to do a project specifically for Microsoft for the anniversary of Xbox 360. So I worked with them on, they had already designed the bag, but we wanted to explore the design that goes on the bag, so like the graphic design that goes on the bag. So I started by creating a basic 3D model of what their existing bags look like, and then started just to look at the base colors and the base materials that we could use, just something to start off with. And then start to add some details, like elements that could speak to what the Xbox branding look and feel is, and bring that again as a layer of detail. Like here I brought it in as a glossiness. You can see it reflecting very subtly. And then also playing with color, whether it's the red, the black, and very small details. So this was just the base of the project. And then the next step was, the client wasn't sure really what direction they want to go in. So my role here was to help them with creative direction, art direction, and just iterate. So the more that we can produce, the more they can say like, okay, this looks good, this looks wrong, maybe this way. And then we can start to decide and brainstorm and ideate together what the correct direction is. So for these, it's like just drag and drop again. Use Substance materials, maybe modify a few things, but then the client has a good idea like, oh, I want to move in this direction, or I love the colors there. And that's what happened. Like, the colors there, the client really loved how bright they were. And then that helped us with the direction that we moved forward in. So from that, started to design different lines in Illustrator and speak to the Xbox design language, and then apply that in Substance on the backpack. And when the client was on board and they liked the concept, send this backpack to the factory, the Substance files. Factory knows exactly what to do. And then on the first sample, it's almost there. So this was the final product. You can see the difference. It's almost one-to-one of what the Substance file looked like and what the final backpack looks like. So I guess the thing I'm trying to tell you is that there is no right or wrong. There's different paths. Like a lot of people usually ask me, like, how do we do this? Or how should I start? Or what should my process look like? Everybody's different. Like, see what works for you. There's no right or wrong. Just be brave and just have fun. That's the main important thing. And for me, what really helped me was using different programs and mixing them in things that are not expected, like using visual effects programs for industrial design for visual effects. Again, there is no right or wrong. Like, I used Photoshop and Illustrator when I first started as a graphic designer. Then I moved to 3D Max and V-Ray to improve my 3D modeling and rendering techniques. Then I moved to Painter to learn texturing. Then I learned Houdini and Redshift for visual effects. But then the thing is that I started to mix all these together, and that's where all the interesting results came. Like when I showed you those two lenses, visual effects, industrial design, blurring them together, I think like this is really where all the magic happens, and it's different for every one of us. So remember the magazines I showed you in the beginning? I told you that as a kid, I was dreaming to one day design something that's on those magazines. So these are some pictures from 2012. The first two feature some of my work on the cover. And then these two feature my work inside of them. And it was great to see the whole thing come full circle almost 20 years later. And there's more of what I talked about in terms of my experiences in the companies in a book that I also put out 2 years ago, 2022, called The Innovator's Handbook, where I discuss my different collaborations and techniques and things that I faced in the industry. So if there's one thing that I can leave you with today, that is to dream big, and there are no limits, there is no right or wrong, and just have fun. That's the journey. Enjoy the journey. And thank you very much. Kamsahamnida.